And they said, has no one told you anything? And I said, about what? And they said, that MED is stopping new issues. I said, what?
Legendary Mad Magazine writer Dick DeBartolo responds to changes at America's signature Contrarian Monthly.
What am I going to do?
This is Democratic Visions. But first, producer Jeff Strait hears from Minnetonka residents who oppose plans for a mountain bike trail in Lone Lake Park.
Just the peace and quiet of being able to come here and almost completely forget that you're even in the middle of a big metro area.
The trail would let bikers rip through protected areas with pristine big woods and an endangered bumblebee, and would betrayed decades of Minnetonka stewardship.
I think this is the most beautiful park that we have in this area. My first walks are very early in the morning, so I get to see the ecosystem at its best.
Lone Lake Park's 146 scenic acres are nested in southeast Minnetonka. It boasts nearly 2 miles of formal trails, including a loop through a remnant Minnesota big woods and wetlands, and alongside a restored prairie and branch of 9 Mile Creek. As a Minnetonka community park, Lone Lake also sports arguably the most beautiful settings in Minnesota for pickleball, basketball, youth soccer, tennis, and families. Families and friends who merit time off from our ever-crowding high-tech world. Rush hour on Shady Oak Road east of the park is in sharp contrast to the quiet of trails within. But the traffic speaks to the appeal of southeast Minnetonka and adjacent quarters of Eden Prairie and Hopkins for small and large employers, for commercial and service sectors, and new housing. Investments, the coming of Southwest Light Rail, and smart planning are part of the mix. A city consultant projects that the best opportunities for infill and repositioning or redevelopment in Minnetonka are in the Opus and Ridgedale areas. Major projects in Opus have already begun or are in the planning, financing, and approvals pipeline. Its near future promises more residents and more daily visitors. That future also guarantees a more important role for Lone Lake Park.
This park has a field of wildness that you can't find in Minnetonka. It's very difficult to find. You have to really go to. And so that's part of the magic of being in this space.
Now, mountain bike activists have claimed that little will change at Lone Lake if their 4.7-mile course is built. I don't think so. After checking videos of local mountain bike trails on YouTube, it is clear to me that there would be change that would betray the defining character of Lone Lake Park and Minnetonka. I love Lone Lake Park. With me right now is Linda Russell. She lives in Minnetonka and she's a retired school teacher. Also, Larry Wade is here. He's a naturalist. He's written a book about Lone Lake Park. He takes walking tours of that lovely part of Minnetonka. Welcome to Democratic Visions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. What's happening in Minnetonka right now regarding Lone Lake Park?
There's a proposal to build 4.7 miles of mountain bike trails.
There's many of us that are opposing this bike path.
Now, part of Lone Lake Park is that classic big woods that characterized a lot of Minnetonka, parts of Eden Prairie, and all around Lake Minnetonka.
That's correct.
And you guys are taking care of that remnant of the big woods. Talk a little bit more about
Well, the forest at Lone Lake has existed for over 700 years.
700 years.
700 years. That's the age that biologists are telling me that the Big Woods actually was. And they said that the Big Woods was so dense that a squirrel could go from one end, which would be where Monticello is, down to Mankato without ever touching the ground.
You know, we're worried about the rainforest in Brazil, but
that's a very good point. We've got right here, we have it happening right here. I've been working with a DNR biologist, and according to him, only 3% of the Big Woods exists that was once there.
So it is very important, wouldn't you agree, Linda, to not mess with what's left?
It seems to be that the values of Minnetonka as a city are to preserve green spaces and to have a healthy respect for that, and we would encourage the city to preserve this remnant of a Big Woods and make sure it's protected for our future generations to learn about.
Well, maybe I wrongly assumed that it was protected.
Well, it is true that part of the park is a preserve.
Okay.
And the preserve is to provide passive use and nature study, things like that. The other part of the park is for recreation. There's soccer fields and tennis courts and basketball courts and plenty of opportunities for active use of the park. And you're right, the preserve, you'd think, would be protecting those trees, but this trail project would damage and take out some trees.
And it's going to impact the land. We're talking about erosion, compaction of the soil. Sure, the trees might continue to live, but however, it's going to impact their growth and also the energy of the land there. It's when you walk back there, it's pristine. And that's what fills up the walker, you know, that's out there to enjoy that, enjoy those big trees.
Well, the word passive recreation is used to describe bird watchers, people who just want to hike. It's not passive at all, at least for people like me. There is so much happening out there.
That's a very good point.
If you look and
bird
walk
watchers.
slowly. Yeah. And it just every time I walk over that branch of 9 Mile Creek underneath those trees, there's something different happening there. It is a theater, the theater of Mother Nature, and it's beautiful. And it comes also not with just the visuals, but with the sound. It's a blessing, and there's not much left. I would imagine most people support your stand regarding protecting this area.
Well, I don't know if they do or not. You know, the council has got a tremendous amount of pressure on them.
One of the things that we don't know is really how does the neighborhood feel about this, because there have been no neighborhood meetings on this proposal. And since it is a park in the southeastern corner of Minnetonka, those of us who live there do consider this to be our neighborhood park.
Yeah.
Yes, many of us have joined together in this friends group, and many of us have communicated with the council members and the mayor, and we've met with them, and we've written letters, and we've been at council meetings. But we don't really have a broad sense of it because there hasn't been yet an opportunity for them to actually hear from the neighbors as a group of neighbors. They are required to have community meetings, and when they abandoned a different park to put the mountain bike trails in and they chose Lone Lake Park, they did not go back to the beginning and have neighborhood meetings. So they bypassed that opportunity to find out how do the neighbors who use the park all the time actually feel about this. We are encouraging the council to go back and do that. We shouldn't be going ahead to vote on August 26th without some more organized input from the people who live nearby the park.
That's a very good point. I want to add something.
Yeah.
And the big woods were cut. Only 3% exists today. Lone Lake was cut in the 1930s for raspberry farming. I've heard a number of people say that, well, it's not really the big woods because it was cut. And so I enlisted the help of DNR biologists, and I asked him to walk out there. And he's a plant ecologist, and his whole job is to analyze the land of spaces and assess what's happening there. And basically what he said was that the land has fully recovered from that clear cut. And the reason it has recovered is because of all the 20 years of restoration that the city has done it is superior to many other areas where in other communities.
You're telling me your city of Minnetonka, has spent 20 some years restoring not only the big woods, but also the prairie along the 9 Mile Creek branch.
Absolutely.
So I've fell in love with this park, working in it, working with volunteers, doing invasive species removal. I, discovered all these new plants that I hadn't encountered before, and it wasn't until afterward I realized that this was an intact plant community. But I really...
And the voters of Minnetonka have been stewards of this park for a long, long time.
Yeah, and not only this park, but the entire so many of our community parks have been just done a tremendous job.
Those natural amenities, once they're destroyed, they're gone forever. And I think that maybe the mountain bike people can look elsewhere.
And in fact, there will be 2 new mountain bike courses near Minnetonka. One in Carver Park is planned. It's going to be 10 miles long. Our proposed in Lone Lake Park is only 4.7, which is very close to the minimum acceptable length.
Sure.
And then apparently Edina is planning a 6-mile course in Braemar Park. Our city doesn't need to spend the time and the money or the risk the destruction of valuable natural resources to provide something that our mountain bikers can get so close by on either side of Minnetonka.
I know the city of Wayzata, they had 14 acres that they were going to that was going to come up for development. It's right next to where Lund's is, so it's downtown, and they spent $3 million. They put up a bond, spent $3 million. They bought the land, and now it's a preserve. This land that we're looking at, it's part of our local heritage.
Now the difference between that Wayzata stand of big woods and the one in Lone Lake Park is that Lone Lake Park is not right next to Highway 12.
That's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
It is a noisy woods.
Yeah, it's not that great. No. But however, they did do it. I mean, that was impressed.
Well, they did do it. And that's why they come down to Lone Lake Park for a real quiet walk in the woods, I think.
My thought about this whole thing is that this issue is not really about mountain biking. It's really about who we are as a people and what our vision for the future is and how we treat the land. So those are the things I'm thinking of. And I want my grandkids to come in there and be able to walk in that park and learn the story. It's a sad story about the cutting down of the big woods. Well, we need to know what our history is. And if we start bringing kids there, then they can develop a greater appreciation for the land.
That's a great thought. I remind people that humans evolved next to savannas and marshes, not next to freeways or with earbuds.
Yeah, we need to remember who we are.
The city of Minnetonka is currently considering a guide plan that will go to 2040. However, it has long had a plan and mode of operation for this park.
That's true. In 1999, there was a plan referred to as the Post Plan, which is about the use of open spaces in Minnetonka. And it says in it that there should be land set aside for the preservation of natural resources and for remnant landscapes. And I interpret remnant landscapes to be things like the big woods. There's an old growth nannyberry part of this park that's one of the oldest. And that this plan also provides for passive use opportunities. And by passive use, what the city identified at that time through the park board's plan, it was nature-based trails, overlooks, interpretive programs, things like that. Okay. Things that don't require a lot of equipment or special trail construction or anything.
So it's part of Minnetonka's...
It's been part of Minnetonka's value system for a long time. And that is actually the time that it prompted some restoration in the park. That was the beginning of that 2 decades long restoration.
Yeah. I'd like to add something that's not even in this preservation plan. And that is, they didn't think about having an endangered species in our community. And I think it was 2016 that Heather Holm, entomologist, who's a published entomologist who happens to live in Minnetonka, discovered this rusty patched bumblebee. And it since has become our Minnesota state bee. It's an endangered species, and its distribution has been reduced 80% of what it once was.
Nationwide?
Nationwide. It is found in the Minneapolis area, and it has specific needs to its habitat that are required. That's another reason that we're fighting to create a preserve.
I'd like to add that most people don't know how this bumblebee lives. And we might think that you wouldn't want to build a trail through the wetland garden because they forage there, but actually they nest underground, and they nest in a new place every year. So to say that a bike trail could be built and just avoid a nest is very uninformed, is based on a lack of understanding of the needs of this bee, that it needs to have an area that would be undisturbed so that it can go in different places, and it would not be just in the field or just near the gardens. The queen bee needs to forage on early spring ephemerals that bloom in the actual woods in the early spring when there are no other plants blooming. Mm-hmm. So it would be very normal for it to be nesting up in the areas where they're looking at bike trails.
Is there a vision? Is there a need for a vision for the future of the park?
I believe so. I believe that this proposal has galvanized this group of people that has become the Friends of Lone Lake Park to rethink what could this park actually be and how could it contribute to the other wonderful amenities that Minnetonka offers its residents. We would like to see this park keep the big woods, maybe put it under the protection of a land trust so that it is considered officially a big woods remnant. Many of us have been volunteering in the park for years. I've pulled my share of buckthorn, and so has my husband, and Larry brings all these kids into the park. We'd really like to continue to work. We're not finished with this park.
The Friends of Lone Lake Park would love to hear from you. You can get in touch with them through Facebook. That's Facebook.
There is anybody today with a phone can be a producer. Anybody today with a computer can be a writer.
Yeah.
I first met Dick DeBartolo in 1983 while on assignment for a long-forgotten show.
You know, I was so worried it was going to rain today.
Well, rain or shine, we do these things.
Hey, you know what? I want to go get
America knows Dick as the Giz Wiz guy and Mad Magazine's maddest writer. Mad Magazine is still around, but you'll no longer find it at a magazine rack or a newsstand. And that's a shame because the U.S. Constitution and Mad Magazine were printed with ink. So via Skype, Dick answered some questions of mine from his New York communications bunker.
Okay, that's Dick DeBartolo fiddling around with the microphone right there. Believe it or not, George Lucas, the producer and director of Star Wars, called Mort Drucker and Dick DeBartolo the Leonardo da Vinci and George Bernard Shaw of satire. A bit much, don't you think?
It cost me $100 to have him say that.
Really?
No.
He's that cheap? But anyway, Mad's changing now. It has a new role in American society. And you've been there since, what, 1959, 58?
No, my first was 1962, my first article.
1962. You were still in high school, weren't you?
Yes. And
did you graduate from high school?
No, I will this fall, so I'm very excited about that.
Okay, good.
I have to finish summer school and then I'll be done.
Okay, good. Well, things are changing now.
Well, the biggest change, the biggest change, I guess, is there were two giant changes. I'll do it that way. Mad is part of Warner Entertainment, and Warner Entertainment owns DC Comics, which Mad is a part of DC Comics. And for years, they were saying that all divisions of the entertainment Warner has to move to the West Coast, to Burbank. And no one at Mad would go. So DC Comics moved out there, and every year they would say, if you don't go, we're going to close the office. And they would keep adding a year to it. And then finally, in December of 2017, they just said, no one's going. We're closing the New York offices. We'll just start with a new staff in California. I didn't know where I stood, but the new senior editor, Bill Morrison, said, you've been in every issue for more than 50 years, and we would like you to continue that if you're up for that. And I said, yeah, I'll do that. So even though there's a new staff in California, I kept writing for him. But the magazine changed drastically. I don't know. Did you ever see a copy of New Mad?
Yeah, I have, yes.
Yeah, it was kind of half comic, half mad. I don't think it blended well, but and not being in the office anymore, I have no idea if the circulation got better, got worse.
Back in 2017, that's not long ago, Rolling Stone said, operating under the cover of barf jokes, Mad has become America's best political satire magazine. And of course, we all agree with that. And that's been your role. Pop culture, social media, films, television, that's piqued your interest in writing very sharp pieces with the artists. Just an amazing thing. Now, what's going on here? Mad is apple pie for guys who want to hear the truth through humor and satire.
Well, what's going on is very sad. First of all, there was so little communication between New York and L.A. because we were no longer in office. There was no person to call, and then they would tell us all the news. And it was July 3rd, getting ready for the July 4th weekend, and I called out to ask about something I was working on, and they said, has no one told you anything? And I said, about what? And they said that Mad is stopping new issues. I said, what? And they said, after Mad 10, and I was talking about something I had written for 10, we will stop producing issues with new material and start just reproducing, have a new cover, and then old articles in it, which basically is what used to be called the Mad Specials. They would do a special on a certain number of years and find all the articles and put it in there. Well, I mean, I shed some tears when I hung up. I thought, oh my gosh, this has been around for, I think it was 66 years, 65 in New York, and then it only lasted like a year and a half in L.A. Now, I know there are a lot of things that work here is that print media is really in trouble. But so that's sort of where it stands, that the issue on stands now is 9. There's one new issue, 10. There have been rumors that Mad did one big special a year called the Mad 20. It was the 20 dumbest things of the past year. Yeah. And since they had started getting material for that, and I had already written something for that, they may eke out a Mad 11.
Wow.
But then that's as far as it goes.
Well, the thing about Mad Magazine that the late night TV shows and Saturday Night Live does not do is cast a far broader net for targets to make fun of and to satirize. And that's why the magazine format, the print version, is really, really important. You guys, over the life of the magazine, have inspired a lot of the top-rate comics and satirists for decades and decades, and now this thing is kind of gone.
Well, it will be, and the interesting thing is when you said cast a wide net, the thing about that is the writers, you were never assigned anything.
You cannot control the writers. There's no way to control the writers. This is a writer-oriented magazine. We never assign topics.
I just have to pick up my paycheck. In case you didn't know, we get paid scale.
I mean, you would be assigned a movie or a TV show because they didn't want two writers writing on the same thing. But the writers could write about anything they wanted and send it in.
Which is wonderful, because late night TV, the talk shows, it's all about Trump. Trump, Trump, Trump. Come on. Too much of that stuff. There's a lot of other silly, stupid, dangerous things happening in this country, and we need you guys back. Now, I have another question. Do you believe in the Lazarus principle? Things come back to life.
You know, I'm not sure. Only because there is anybody today with a phone can be a producer. Anybody today with a computer can be a writer.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, you know, I do a podcast and I review stuff on ABC. And sometimes I'll say, let me see what someone else thought of this. Well, it turns out that there must be thousands of people posting reviews online. You know, for anything from, are they kidding me? This lady sitting in a dark corner and I can't see what she's holding, and she's trying to review a product and she's out of focus. I mean, but there is so much content online and in the world that I don't know how Mad can make a lot of noise anymore. I mean, maybe that's a bad way to feel about it.
What kind of dirge music would you choose when that time comes, when it's officially no longer a rerun? Dirge music, funeral music, would you choose?
Oh, you know, Chopin. Dennis says Chopin. Dennis, my agent. Okay. Chopin.
Yeah,
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
You know, fortunately, we have the memories of the Gange years where, you know, no one can ever take that away. I remember when Bill died and Warner, people from Warner came over and they looked around and they called us all in and they said, this place looks like a high school newspaper. Well, we thought,
cool.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Isn't that great?
Cool.
And then that was followed by, this is not going to happen now that Bill is dead. Bill put a wall between you and the corporate world. He's dead. The wall is coming down. This is our introduction to being absorbed into one of the Time Warner offices. They were really depressed about that. You know, I remember when Bill, he said, listen, I'm taking over some more office space. Who needs more space, and tell me why? Bill, I need 2 more desks. All right. Why do you need 2 more desks? I want to put model trains in. Oh, my God. Bill said, that's great. Yes, you'll have 2 new desks. And he did.
Does a fellow like Bill Gaines roll over in his grave?
It's going to be hard because he was cremated.
Yeah. I bet he could do it, though, somehow.
He'll spin in his urn.
Dick's wonderful book, Good Days and Mad, is stuffed with great insider stories and photos. These days it's available online from the usual vendors.
Democratic Visions is handcrafted by volunteers from Eden Prairie, Hopkins, Edina, Minnetonka, and Bloomington. Watch us on select cable systems and on our YouTube channel. This is Carol Sundstrom.